and that he should have some strong emotions about this person who's on the other side of the world. How does that happen? It is inconceivable, to be honest. But he had been manipulated. His emotions had been manipulated to have such a powerful response.
I mean, I gotta go a step higher and call that brainwashing myself.
Well, yeah, absolutely, it is. When we have a strong viewpoint on something of which we know absolutely nothing, it's brainwashing.
Yeah. So that's happening on the scene. What about the unseen? This idea of, ley lines and why is it that religious churches are built on ley lines and places of water? And, I've heard tales of how, actually, Christianity is trying to control all of this and then putting out the messages through the, energetics to control people.
Okay, so this is a bit of a tricky subject in some way, because I do know of quite a few people who are very much into ley lines. And certainly the Chinese of old, they believed, because of acupuncture, they believed in the ley lines, and they would try to build places in line with this.
The feng shui.
There is no doubt that the flow of underground water creates an electrical flow.
Mm-hmm.
And we can be affected by this.
As electromagnetic beings.
As we are. And then there is other people who have this idea that somehow, to put this into perspective, the world, the earth, is about 6 parts water, 1 part land. So most of the earth is water. And there is a small section that is land. And out of that small section that is land, you've got a little area the size of Texas, I was told by my son one day a few years back, that you could have all the people in the world living there with a little bit of land around them. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was what he said. I'll say that is reasonably true. So, although 6/7 of the world is water and 1/7 is land, then 1/100th of the land is people. I'll say, I don't know if that is true, but for the sake of argument, put that into some sort of perspective. 1/100th of the land is inhabited by the whole world population. And now, some people would tell us that 5 of them could go and heal the energies of the earth by standing on a spot somewhere. I mean, I cannot reconcile the scale between the size of the earth and those 2 little midges somehow imagining that they have the power to alter the flow of the energies of the earth for good or bad, call it what you will. To me, that is inconceivable. And this is what I call ego. This belief that somehow we are capable of godlike powers. Well, in truth, we are capable of godlike powers, but not at that scale. Our scale of godlike powers is diminutive. It is our scale of godlike powers is limited to our capacity to project emotions and images to affect the group around us, other people, not the material, not the ground, not the soil, not the material world. We don't have the power of creation to affect the material world. We do have the power of creation to affect other people around us with our emanations, both emotional and mental.
So we can influence our local reality, our local community.
And we can influence our local community, and collectively this can sort of grow to affect the whole of the community, the whole of the world, which we do, which is why we're in such a sad state of affairs in the world today. Because like in 1984, the pigs are in charge of the farm. So we're stuck in that. So
I think it was Animal Farm, wasn't it?
Animal Farm, yes, that big farm.
Same one.
So what I'm leading towards is this idea that we affect and are affected by others emotionally. We do have that power, all of us. Just because we are unaware does not mean it's not true. But because we are unaware, other people can manipulate us to influence how we experience emotions and how we see the world. We can be indoctrinated. And, if we talk about psychic protection, this I would say is psychic protection number one. Stop reading the mainstream news. Stop reading, or if you must read it with a critical eye. Believe nothing. I'm going to digress for a second and speak about the America and the 6th of January insurrection, alleged 2 years ago, 26 months ago. And the Democrats went through a whole thing for 26 months where they said these people tried to destroy America. They came in here, they were rebels, they were this, they were that, they were the other, send them off to prison. Now suddenly there is video information which they had deliberately suppressed, which shows that this was not true. It shows that these people were peaceful. There were some agitators, which some people believe is down to the FBI and other agencies. But the group of people, they were peaceful people, but they altered the narrative. And most people believed that narrative because they showed them the video they wanted them to see. Now, because there's been a change within the government and the Republicans have taken over the House, they've now allowed that information by Tucker Carlson to be disseminated, and that now is gaining prominence. And people hopefully will start to realize, once more, we've been lied to. Once more, this is not new. We've been lied to again and again and again through the generations. Wake up. We have to be more discerning, more critical of what politicians tell us. We could go to Britain with, what's his name?
Which one?
The health minister of X.
Matt Hancock.
This happens again and again and again. We are lied to. We've been lied to again and again. It's time to become your own person. This is the first rule of psychic protection. Critical faculties. Be critical of what you read, of what you hear, of what people tell you. If you have a belief system, ask yourself, where does it come from? And if it comes from because someone else has told you, take it with a pinch of salt. If it comes from your own experience, trust it at least 70%. You always have to allow for the fact that our perception of reality is skewed anyway. That we don't often see reality as it truly is because our mind is so controlled. However, step number one, more critical. Step number two, the recognition that the emotional power is real, and we are affected by others, and we affect others. Now, this is, I'm sorry to say, this is more of an issue for healers. Those people who have worked on themselves and who have, I'm assuming that a healer has worked on themselves, not necessarily true, and who have the capacity to experience more powerful emotions. Well, the more powerful our capacity to experience an emotion, the more powerful our ability to disseminate emotions, to put emotions out there. And, there's been times in the past when my family could hardly stand me. The full moon would come, and I'd have some problems in terms to do with my foot, which I had at the time, and some of my organs were not working properly, and that would affect my emotions, and I would be horrible to be with, because I would do a little rant and rave. I'd be very apologetic, but at that time it would just come out of me, and that would be a physical onslaught on other people. They would, my emotions, when they go out,
they received it.
Oh yeah, you know it. I'm not comfortable to be with. So it's a double-edged sword to develop oneself, to really integrate oneself. This journey is not an easy journey for oneself or others. And that's the truth. So our emotions are really powerful, or they can be. And so we can be affected by other people. And when we're affected by other people like that, we need to recognize, first of all, what is not right within me. But assuming that we've got to the point where we can love and accept ourselves. I've been quite horrible in my life, unintentionally, but nevertheless, I've been horrible. I accept that in me. I don't condone it. I don't accept it as the way to be in the world, but I've been there. And, I can be very sad by this, but I cannot change my past. I cannot change my process of growth. And all that's left for me is to forgive myself and to accept myself. And yes, this is who I was. This is a part of me. I can't change it. So forgiveness is really important. And this is the only way that we grow. We have to accept ourselves, warts and all. And we have a lot of warts in our life.
Yeah.
All of us.
I think some really powerful work I once did was just reflecting on everybody that I known and had come into my life, and to try to individually reach out to them energetically and feeling that connection between every person that I've ever known, and asking for their forgiveness for how I might have done them wrong, or for my mistakes, for my failings. As I've changed myself as a person now, but back then the things that I was embarrassed about, how I treated people, I looked for forgiveness just to send that out energetically, and that was a really big shift for me. Just doing that with everybody that I've known, a much lighter sense arrived, and a real lightness in my heart, and fitting more into my heart as well.
And that's really important. It's not the whole story.
It's part
but
of it. Yeah.
It's a good important step.
Yeah.
It's, on the journey.
Yeah.
It's, we all need to do that. And then there are layers within layers, because the real core sense of victimhood is so deep down out of our awareness that we cannot connect with that till we're ready, till a moment comes when we've cleared enough of the surface deck to really look underneath. So we've got the recognition of indoctrination, and that we need to be critical.
Neutral.
Well, we need to be critical of the thoughts that come into our heads.
Yeah. But reacting to stuff when we get new information, or I don't mind reading the newspapers. I don't do it all the time. I know that if it was on all the time, I'm going to be down in doom. But I like to see what's going on in the world. But I don't react to things, and I'm observing how I'm taking that in. Neither accepting nor rejecting. Just trying to lift myself up, take a bigger view of it.
On that score, coming back to Gurdjieff, my favorite teacher from the past, not my past because he was before my time. He died in 1950 something, I think. He was very focused on the awareness that we are machines and that we need to wake up. And his journey was how to help people to wake up. And he really struggled because in those days, indoctrination was ironclad. Today, indoctrination is not so ironclad as it used to be in the Victorian era.
Mm-hmm.
And even the early part of the century.
Protocols, ways to behave, so much expectation.
Yeah,
pressures.
absolutely. And the need to belong to the group was paramount. To be ostracized. This is why they could go around the women in the First World War, and they would sort of give you a white feather. If you were not in the war, if you were a young lad walking around town, they would give you a white feather. That would say you're a coward.
Mm.
And you'd be so ashamed. You would go and enlist.
Yeah.
So, the conditioning was so powerful. And he was working with people at a time when it was almost impossible to wake them up. And one of the things he said was, well, he did a lot of things. One of them, he wrote a set of books which were explicitly written to help you become more aware of yourself. And he wrote it in such a way, one paragraph used to take a whole page, to increase your capacity to maintain your focus. And he used to say, well, one of the problems with human beings is they read newspapers without digesting it. So they would read things, but it would just be words. And so they would be influenced by this, but there would be no digestion of the content. And he wanted to change that. And this is why he wrote this, amongst other reasons, why he wrote these books. And I read them many times in my youth, and they definitely altered my ability to perceive the world. And it was a great help to me at the time. I don't know whether that would I still have those books with me. I don't know whether they would still be true today, because he was a teacher from another century. And what he had to share was really important, but it belonged to that century. We now need new people who can share information from our experiences as the world is today. I'm not a teacher. But I do have experiences and I'm happy to share them. So it's this process of we're so lost in our heads that we're so easily manipulated that our engines of creation, our emotions and our minds have been stolen, if you like, and used by external agencies for their own ends of creating a group reality. And we need to change that. So everything that we're sharing here is part of that parcel of, you need to become aware of where you're at so that you begin a process of change in the world. And So recognizing that we have strong emotions that can affect others and we can be affected by them. If you are a healer in the sense of a psychotherapist, an acupuncturist, I don't know, a masseur, a counselor, anyone who deals with other people where you have to touch them, or without touching, whether you are engaging with others and you yourself go into this receptive state of empathy, it is really important to become aware that if suddenly you begin to experience emotions in sympathy with this other person, you need to ask yourself the question, are these my emotions or do they belong to the other person? If they belong to the other person, then you need to send them back. And how do we send them back?
With love and kindness.
Okay, so yeah, love and kindness, that's true, but we need more than that. We need to sense, we need to connect with the emotion, and we need to energetically send it back. We need to sense, feel, kinesthetically experience, this is yours. And specifically, we move it from our second chakra in our lower abdomen, which is to do with emotions, and we send it back to them, to their second chakra. And we say, we sense, we imagine, we experience the reality of, this is yours. Feel it. And you're almost willing them to experience that emotion that got transferred to you, which was out of their awareness, but which was theirs. So you send it back. And you help them to experience that so that it rises within them. So this is the last leg of psychic protection in a way, whereby we don't own another person's emotional output, which happens out of their awareness. And I should add by that, of course, that we can be affected and are affected by emotional expression which is out of the group's awareness. It is in the group's subconscious. And we are by osmosis affected by that as well. So we need to be critical of what happens within us. Now, when I say critical, I don't mean criticize, where we self-criticize ourselves and find ourselves wanting, because we do that a lot anyway. We find ourselves, we are critical of, I don't like the look of me, my face, my eyes, my feet, whatever it is about my physical body. I don't like the thoughts which are running through my head. We know they're ours, but we don't like them. And we then beat ourselves about it. Or the thoughts in our heads, oh God, that's a horrible thought. Oh, I'm such a horrible person. Yeah, I'm not talking about putting ourselves down, where we are criticizing ourselves. I'm talking about being critical of anything that happens within our bodies, where we recognize, is this ours or not? Does it come from us or is it external? And that takes diligence, because we exist in a soup of negativity. We're surrounded by it. The whole world is filled with it. And so maintaining our boundaries is not easy. And this is where the whole issue of love comes in. So there's different forms of psychic protection. We need to connect with our hearts, and we need to be in a state of acceptance of how the world is. And we don't take on board the indoctrination from the world, however it comes, whether it comes from newspapers or magazines. So we begin with love, and that itself generates a love bubble around us, which of itself deflects the lower level negativity. Because negativity affects us when we are within our egos. When we are lost in our egos, lost in fear, then it's a bit like a plane. You know, the old planes, the ones with
turbines. Is it a turbine?
The what?
No, it's not a turbine, is it?
No. The the ones with the
motor engine.
No, it's not a wheel. It's
blade.
The blades. They are blades.
And they're just engines with.
It's an engines. They're engines with multiple blades, but there's a word for that. For God's sake, what's it called? Propeller.
A propeller. Yes.
So the engines with propellers, they couldn't go very high, so they were always affected by turbulence. Yeah, whenever they were flying, and I went in one of those planes once, and bloody hell, it was up and down, up and down. I was sick half the time. And now they've discovered the planes with jet engines, and they go higher up, and they're in the stratosphere, and rarely do they experience turbulence. Occasionally they do, but by and large, it's a very smooth ride. So it's the same with our egos. When we're in our egos, we're in the turbulence stream, right? We're in the propeller plane. Anything can move us up and down. We need to rise up above that to the higher stream so that we're above the fray and we experience the calmness. But to experience that, we need to move into our hearts. So that's the journey. That's what you're after.
That's a beautiful metaphor. You always find the aeroplane with the propellers or the jets or turbines. You don't work in aviation engineering.
No. So one last thing then. So with regards to psychic protection, assuming that you are a therapist of some sort, so I mentioned the remote, and I mentioned the touching, always send the emotion back. But what happens when you've forgotten to do so? Then, because that happened to me the other day, and it created a terrible problem in me.
I mean, would you want to talk a bit about, because you haven't touched on what happened. You just said something happened.
Yes, I will. So a few days back, in one day I did 2 sessions with regression, going back with clients going back to a previous lifetime, and the way that I do this with people is quite different from the way other people do this, in that I don't get them to re-experience in a past life everybody was Hitler or Napoleon or a king or a princess. In my experience, most people tend to be nobodies. And the way that I work is that I ask Charlie for information. And what I do is I am totally open, very empathetic to information between Charlie and me, so that I can pick up the nuances, I can pick up the images and the verbal words, and then double check to make sure that it's all accurate. But I have to be in a highly receptive state, which I am in those times. And it does often happen that I am then touched by the person, or I am touched by the emotional experience as I go into the past, and invariably there's trauma followed by some sort of horrible death. I'll share one of them. It was I'll share this one because this one I can. The other one I don't have permission for. She was a 2-year-old little girl in Africa, in the desert, one of these Bedouin tribes, and she'd gone to where the horses were. The horses were kept corralled with a rope, and she'd walked in there, and something happened that triggered the horses into fright, and they trampled her to death. And so I found that really moving. And it wasn't really about her. It was actually about her parents, who had lost this little girl, who took on board the guilt. Although that wasn't my purview. My purview was simply to help my client to experience that and to let her move away from that, and to recognize, to die consciously and recognize that she was doing this for her parents. They had to go through this, and it's a soul contract. She was there for them, not for herself in that sense. But I was really affected by that. But that was the second one. The first one was even worse. And so, and I was told by the first one, she said, so how do you deal with these emotions? And I said, oh, yeah, I just process them. God, my arrogance. I should have known better, really. Because, the world always shares information with us. The world is always telling us where we are and what we need to do. And everyone around us is a mouthpiece for our world, for our internal world in some way or other. So she was telling me, but I didn't listen because I'd gone into a space of arrogance. Can happen to any of us. So anyway, 3:00 in the morning, I wake up and I have an intense pain in my stomach. Oh, it's cramping. I get up and I go to my room and I just lie there and I focus on the pain. I always say pain and suffering is really healthy. It's really important to build up our capacity to experience pain, whether it's emotional, psychological. So, I like to do what I talk about. So I was lying there, experiencing my pain. God, it was excruciating, focusing on the pain to the center of it. And then there came a moment with my hand on my stomach when the saliva began to flow. And I've experienced it in the past a few times, so I know the routine. And once the saliva began to flow, gulp, 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 and I then began to relax, and then I just needed to vomit. And there was hardly anything there. But because my last meal had been the day before at 4 p.m. So there was nothing really, there was just a little bit that hadn't been processed. So it meant that this had actually begun quite a bit later. And vomited my guts out. There was nothing to vomit, but went through the process. And then, oh God, I was so sore, it lasted a whole day. So I'm lying there and I'm saying, oh God, what do I do here? Because that was a silly question, because what do I know? So I need to ask Charlie, what do I do? And so Charlie told me, and which is what literally prompted this whole event to share. And so what he said was, you took on board your client's emotions. You did not send them back. And now they're sitting inside of you like indigestion. They have not been digested. If I had processed the emotions, I would have been okay. But those emotions had nothing to do with me. There was nothing for me to hook on to. So they were just sitting there, unprocessed. And so what he suggested was, touch the wall with your right hand for a minute, 1 to 2 minutes, and send that emotion and from your solar plexus, because it's been sitting with me for a while, it gone up to my head as well, and just kinesthetically sense it, experience that emotion just traveling through you out of your right hand into the wall, down deep into the ground, which I did. And I asked a few more questions. I said, well, if you were to put your hand on a tree, anywhere from 6 months old to a fully grown tree, that's even better, because their roots will help with that connection. He also said that metal's no good, so it's no point touching metal, but a table which is sitting on soil or tiles, that's fine. As long as you've got that direct connection to the ground, then it will work.
What about an earthing sheet? That's what I've got. Yeah, I sleep so well.
What's an earthing sheet?
It's basically a cotton sheet that's been impregnated with silver thread, so it goes across the whole of, and it's like I put it at the end of my bed, so my feet touch it. That then connects to a cable, which then goes into the electrical plug just to the ground.
To earth it.
Yeah, to earth it. You said no metal, but it goes into the ground.
Well, copper is it's not iron.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll just ask Charlie.
Yeah.
Right. What about Joshua's suggestion of an earthing sheet, which is silver filaments connected to the copper wires of the earth grid? Would that work? No. Hold on. Is that accurate? Have I understood this correctly? Have I made a mistake? No. Okay.
Check the ego. Okay, well, fair enough.
Pardon me, what was that?
Check your ego. You were checking your ego there.
I always check my ego just in case. Never take anything for granted, not even what comes through. Yeah. So I don't know what it is. I don't understand it. I don't claim to understand this, but that's what it says. Earth connection to the ground.
Yeah.
And you literally have to experience this as a flow. And if you've never done this, then clearly you need to go and do the meditations I've already got out there, which will help you to develop your kinesthetic sense and to connect with your aura, so that you begin to sense it as something that's around us, which it is. We all have an electrical charge, bioelectrical charge. It's almost like a plasma charge around us, and we do have control over this. I've talked about, I don't know whether we're going on too long, but we've talked about how we don't have the power to control the physical environment, and that is true, but we do have the power to control at the quantum level. So we can affect at the I don't know to what extent, but I know that we can affect at the quantum level, but not at the gross physical level. We don't have enough wushu. Our engines are too small. So I think that was probably fairly extensive, do you think? Have we?
I've got nothing else to share, so...
I think we've pretty much done it. We want to change the world, one person at a time. We need to become aware that we're all affected by each other, that we need to protect ourselves from other people's emotional output. We need to own what's ours. We need to forgive ourselves for anything that belongs to us, that's within us, because that's the only way to actually move beyond our egos. It's only through that process of self-love, acceptance, forgiveness, that we rise above our egos. There is no other way. It is not possible to be loving if we don't love ourselves. It is not possible to rise above our egos unless we can separate ourselves from our egos by accepting our egos and loving our egos with all the damage that we have inside us that will never go away. We're damaged, we need to accept that. There's no getting away from that. But there's a lot more to us than that, and that comes through self-forgiveness, self-acceptance, and then that leads to love. And through that, we begin to generate a different energy, not just the emotional energy that we all project like crazy, but the love energy, which is way, way more powerful and can reach so many more people. So, there you go. That'll do for now. Hope you enjoyed yourselves. If you enjoy our talks, please subscribe. Bye for now.